Hi, I'm Jake Winter and I'm Director of Winter Architects. We're an architect's office based in Oxford and London, and we focus on making and doing more good and not less bad for the environment.
I've got one client, they just came to me straight off and were like, I want to do something exceptional. And then he just suddenly said, oh, I've heard about mycelium. But actually that then becomes something that's embedded in the way we build in the future. And just to prove that I don't want to live in a car park because I'm cheap, sometimes that's where you have to put the Eames chair in the corner, which is an expensive piece, just to prove that you have the cash there. You don't need to have this sort of hippie edge to have that. You don't have to put your glass panel in your straw-baled wall to go, hey, everyone, look at how straw-based this is. You can just say, oh, that's just one of the materials in the building. The people who want to build are exceptional people because no logic says you should do it.
We'll do some nice, easy warm-up questions just to get you into it, Jake.
What's your name? Where are you from?
So, what first drew you to architecture, and what keeps you excited about it today?
I think to begin with, I don't like buildings, which was the major drive because I just thought they're all fairly rubbish and quite enclosed and should be more like being outside rather than inside. I don't know why I started architecture. I just liked building and making stuff straight from the word go. And quite quickly realized that wasn't being an architect, building and making, which is why quite quickly after doing a degree, I threw it in and went to work for a carpenter in London, just ripping out warehouses, pulling asbestos out of walls and false ceilings and painting spaces black, building stud walls, putting expensive furniture in it for clients. But then realised I'm not very good at being a carpenter because I don't know if you've had much experience with it. It's a really difficult, incredible skill. It's brutal, and by the time you become good at it, probably in your early 30s, that's just about the time that your body collapses in on yourself, isn't it, as a carpenter? And you can no longer be a carpenter, so you have no choice at that point, do you, than just setting up your own carpentry business and running younger kids and guys coming into the trade. So I could quite quickly see that was going to draw me straight back to a desk again at some point if I stayed in carpentry. So then I sort of naively dropped back into architecture again to see what would happen. And that's more or less where I've been for the last 10, 15 years now. So yeah, I don't really know why I became an architect. I didn't really want to be an architect. I just thought you could do something better with the things we build. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I guess it's part of your journey that you're looking around and decide what stimulates you. But was there a particular moment kind of in your late teens that went, you know what, that's the course I want to do, and it's because I want to, it's just part of what you were intrigued in, or where you realized that actually your skill set was particularly strong in that area? What was that linchpin when you're kind of that 16, 17-year-old going, right, that's the one I'm going for?
Oh, this is taking you back, isn't it? I'm probably from a background where you're supposed to go to university. I went to a school that pushed everybody to go to university. I just feel like the route I got here wasn't necessarily the correct route, if that makes sense, because if you like making things and you're told you can't go and make things because you need to go to university, and at university there's not much opportunity of making things really. Architecture was the one degree that seemed to pretend that it was about building and making and creating and things, but then when you get there it's all about drawing and talking about spaces, and it doesn't necessarily set you up.
I'm going to say, what would you say the main kind of comparison between the courses are now? I mean, you work as a lecturer, or have done for a period of time. How's that journey changed over your career compared to what you were originally exposed to and the way you were taught to how architects are taught today?
Well, I started teaching just to fill a pay gap, and I really don't have time for it anymore, except the first years are fairly incredible people because they are just like clients. They don't know anything about building. It's about trying to talk quickly and bringing people up to speed fast, which is fantastic. And well, one of the first things they learn with us is the difference between a breather membrane and an airtight barrier. And I think I've had architects interview for me for places who don't know the difference between those. But what happens quite often is in that course, they become especially Oxford Brookes, it's very, very technical. It's also very, very sort of ambitious of its forms and its buildings, but it's always grounded in how are you going to build this? Set yourself an impossible challenge and let's see how we can build it. And that's kind of the exciting thing. And I think that's what's kept me in architecture, is you meet fairly unreasonable or excitingly difficult or contradictory clients and people and teachers and schools and planners who all have these completely unreasonable expectations. And you're just like, yeah, how can we do this? How can we actually build what you guys all want? And I think that's the joy of making, isn't it? You set yourself something that hasn't been built, and you just see if you can do it while everybody tells you that you can't do it. Because there's always a new way, and every new project is a chance of finding that. And quite often with a client who's never built before, you can set their standards quite high, so that you can actually try and work out how to build something new, something that's going to change how the world works, change how people interact with each other in buildings, and how the building team interacts with each other as well. But as soon as you're out running your own thing, all of these really exciting difficulties appear, all these people challenges. It becomes like watching reality TV. There's this incredible excitement to the realism of these arguments that people have. And kind of as an architect, I think, sits in that position where they resolve them all, but not with necessarily an agreement. Quite often it's just an idea that excites both those people involved, or those 20 people involved, or those 500 people involved, or however many it is that you end up touching that project, I guess. That's why I've stayed. I've stayed because of difficult clients in architecture, and I really like them, because that's where you feel useful.
Do you think you're kind of like the grease to a building project? A horrible way to term it, but trying to cajole it along and keep things on track?
I think the architect might be the water that's being sprayed into the grease joint, disrupting it, unfortunately, on the whole. I mean, it's an intensely frustrating thing, isn't it? And I think there's a lot of times when architects shouldn't perhaps be involved in projects because of the skills that the builders have already. Sometimes they're really useful, but I think there's a mismanagement sometimes. Maybe they are the grease sometimes. I think actually what they are is they get rid of problems before they happen. Maybe that's putting grease into the machine. You're very passive in a way. And when you get to site as well, you're also, in theory, what you should be is you should be this passive element between the client and the builder. When I was a carpenter, it was great how none of that happened until you were building. We quite often didn't have an idea of what we were building before we started in these warehouse projects. And it would be two of us with the client, who would be some East End mafia guy who looked a bit like a recovering heroin addict, who would have terrible clothes, would own half of Hackney Wick, but would drive a matte black Lamborghini around. And we would just be walking around this room, kicking bits of stud work across the floor, going, should we make the room this big? And you'd be like, no. This big? No. This big? Yeah, let's put it there. And then you would literally just screw a bolt down into the floor and the stud would go in. And then you would just build in front of them. You wouldn't do any of this nonsense drawing, which nobody understood. The architects don't understand. The builders don't understand. The client doesn't understand. And it's this third language, which is completely irrelevant, that everybody tries to bring themselves round, isn't it? And it's not natural to anybody. Some people are really good at it. They're rare. The thing that everybody is good is standing in a space and looking at it and going, I like this, I don't like this. And that's where I think that architect comes in, is that they can teach people how to actually engage and say, hey, you can actually just move this wall. It's really easy. Well, before it's built. But you have a lot of power of agency. You don't just have to decide on surface finishes. You can be bold enough to sort of expose some of the incredible skills of the carpenters. I've got one client they just came to me straight off and were like, I want to do something exceptional, and what's the most cutting edge thing we can do at the moment? And we sort of went through a lot of things, and then he just suddenly said, oh, I've heard about mycelium, mushrooms. I was like, yeah, that is very on the edge of where people are building at the moment. And he was like, I really want to make this work. I want a mushroom mycelium building. And he'd seen a few sort of pavilions that people had done. And now he's at a stage where he wants the house to be a test bed for pushing this as a material. Because there are all sorts of things. I don't want to do that because of my insurance. Am I going to be able to keep it dry? What's going to happen in 20 years? I don't know. Structurally, what are we talking about? Fireproof. Yes, you can find out all these things, but to work out what the fireproof rating of mycelium is, I'm going to have to grow a piece, put it in a trunk, work out how to do all the British standard guidelines for testing, put the blowtorch on it in a controlled position, record that, and then that's a solid piece of research. It's going to cost this client quite a lot of time, but actually that then becomes something that's embedded in the way we build in the future, and maybe that will go nowhere in 50 years' time, because generally people don't move away from wood because we've been building from wood for thousands and thousands of years. And the skills are more or less exactly the same. A saw has not changed. So people are still going to be able to fix these buildings in the future.
It's interesting to hear you saying that, almost part of your job is trying to get them to rein back, and to find that simplicity rather than, strive for the extravagance. Or maybe that's the wrong terminology, because perhaps the extravagance is in the simplicity.
Yeah, the extravagance is saying, look, I don't have to spend money to be classy. I could do. I have the money, but I can build an incredibly perfect building at an efficient way. And just to prove that I don't want to live in a car park because I'm cheap, sometimes that's where you have to put the Eames chair in the corner, which is an expensive piece, just to prove that you have the cash there to spend. But yeah, so it is sort of stripping back to what's valuable and what's needed and what could be useful in the future, and how you can keep your house adaptable. Because all those nice buildings in Oxford that have lasted have been collaged there over the last 1,000 years, haven't they? They weren't all built at once. Those are just the one best building from that generation each time that have lasted. And they've knocked down the other 99%, and they've kept that one. And then the next 100 years, another 1,000 buildings were built, and one of them was unbelievably beautiful. So they knocked down all the others, and gradually, over time, you build up that library, don't you, of beautiful buildings. But on the whole, most of the houses and buildings they're temporary, aren't they?
So what makes one of those buildings the one that gets kept? If you're saying the one in the 1,000, and you're right, there's historic buildings that stand the test of time and others that disappear. But,
And that's why everyone thinks old buildings are better than new buildings. Old buildings are way worse than new buildings. They demolished all the old ones, except for the one that was good. And even those are terrible. I don't know if you've ever worked on a project, or a heritage project, like King's Cross. It's an abysmally badly built building. It's crumbling. The brickwork is terrible. And everyone's like, oh, it's so well done. You're like, no, they are spending billions fixing that because it worked somehow. But there's no way that you can possibly tell when you build today what is going to be good in 150 years' time. It's impossible to say. A future society is going to decide that. And if you're ahead of your time, you're not going to know you're ahead of your time, are you? There's no way of knowing if you're ahead of your time. And if you are ahead of your time, what's the point? It has to work now, doesn't it? It has to solve that problem now. And perhaps the circumstances collide where the client is brilliant, the building is brilliant, the people love it. There were 6 tradies on the site who were just loved what they were doing, and just briefly coalesced and came together to actually care about what they did, because you can't, as a job, do every single project with the utmost care, can you? Sometimes it's just the money isn't there, the time isn't there. Sometimes you're pressured because of the economy and the materials that are available, so you just can't. So much of this is out of your control. I don't know, there was one project I worked on in Oxford I don't know if you've seen it. There's a yoga studio on Osney Island, which is completely clad in copper. Because copper's the most recyclable green thing in a way, because it's never going in landfill because of its value. It will definitely not be skipped. It will be taken off when that building comes to its end of life and turned into something else. And it's all recycled copper in the first place. But the point of that was when we spec'd that, it was before COVID. And I remember looking at all the graphs of material prices. And I don't know, as a contractor, you probably see them, that you see concrete block going up and down, timber suddenly spikes because of the war in Ukraine, suddenly aluminium prices that are up. But at that moment, the graph for copper per ton was really, really low, and it was only just a little bit more expensive than zinc. So they went out to tender as copper on the outside, and we're like, we'll just change it to zinc if we have to. But it got priced in, all the prices came back as being okay. COVID hit, didn't it? And the price of copper absolutely skyrocketed, and that was an unbelievably tough blow on the contractor. So it was only a very, very brief window when you could build from that really beautiful material because it was valuable. And that's why all the previous buildings from like the 50s are all concrete, because that was post-war. It wasn't a choice brutalism. It was forced on people because you weren't allowed to build from wood. Concrete was the only thing you had at that point. So everyone's like, oh, why did everyone like concrete so much? It's like they didn't. It's just the only thing they could afford. And somehow a few architects did one or two really beautiful buildings. And lots did terrible buildings, didn't they? So you can't tell which building's going to last into the future because it's out of your control. All you can do is just make the best of those materials and those people at the time. Maybe that's the building that will actually be amazing and remembered, or maybe it won't. You can't tell.
So you're saying it's build for today, but equally try and make them as flexible as possible, with a vision for the future where inevitably something's going to change, something's going to give, and the buildings that perhaps have stood the test of the time are the ones that have proved to be flexible.
Yeah, but even if you've got a flexible office which can't take an extra 10 stories on top, it's probably not going to happen in Oxford, is it? But it's surprising how many places in London it's happened.
Yeah, I guess a bit difficult to build for today, going, well, we may put another 100 stories on the top of this, so let's build some epic foundations and some columns that are the same size as the rooms you were originally planning, and so on and so forth. You
wouldn't do that, would you? You wouldn't. And because it's no value to you at that point. Longevity of a building isn't necessarily any value to the people who are building today, unless you're a housing association like Peabody in London on the South Bank, or the Coin Street Cooperative, who are building for 300 years, or the council, actually, who are the best clients and always have been, because their build values are high, because they don't want any maintenance in these buildings. And now after all the slagging off people have had for council housing and social housing, those are the most expensive 70s buildings in the city, the ex-council apartments, because they're so tough and rugged, and after 50 years they have not even begun to crack, some of them, and they're sort of desirable brutalist icons, some of them, that people want to live in, and they're being filled with expensive carpets and things. And suddenly, once you put all this moneyed furniture in, which has value and sentimentality and style that people really like, which describes who you are as an occupant, suddenly people are realizing that these spaces are really, really beautiful.
Yeah, but when we're in an environment where anything we build is technically consuming, it's using more material, it's consuming labor. So there's a wave that I'm seeing where people are trying to reuse as much as possible, but kind of linking into the circular economy. However, it seems like one of your principles is, well, actually, no, let's do more. Let's build more, but do it right.
Yeah.
What's your thinking behind that?
This is the problem with all the protests that are happening at the moment about how we should not be building, how we need net zero and people are having a backlash against why should they give up stuff to help the planet? They're like, why? What's the point? I don't want to give up stuff. And I feel like that's kind of a reasonable thing. Like, why should you have to give up things that you perhaps need? Whereas you need to be saying you can have more good things. You don't give up stuff, you take on more good things. Like, you don't say, right, we're going to not build with high carbon materials anymore. You say, right, what we're going to do is we're going to build with materials that have more carbon locked up inside them than it took to make them. And then suddenly you're like, well, okay, so if I'm building out of, say, cross-laminated timber, or some of these other materials like mycelium, which absorbs, or hempcrete, which absorbs a huge amount of energy and carbon, then in theory, the more you build with that, the more carbon you're locking up. And if you make a building that can, if you make a building element like the CLT or cross-laminated timber wall that has a huge amount of carbon in it, and then you keep it dry for 100 years, 200 years, you've taken that out of the air and it's being kept safe. And then at the end of that building's life, perhaps that wall is going to be lifted out and go to the reclamation yard and is going to be used for something else. As long as you keep it dry, timber lasts for thousands of years. I don't know if you've been to any of these churches, but there's that church in Essex, which is over 1,000 years old, was built before England was England. It was in Danelaw on the sort of Danish side of the country. And there are bits of timber in there which are from 800 AD. And there are bits that have been repaired, but this is my thing with timber, you can always, the skills haven't changed. And as well, like at the moment, we're stuffing our building with just poisonous stuff, just because it's, what is it? It's formaldehyde, which is left over from the petrochemical industry, and that's just oil giants being charged to chuck away crap. And there are so many things that are warm other than just poisons, like filling them with hempcrete, which is really high sort of carbon, or mycelium, or all these straws and things. And you don't need to have this sort of hippie edge to have that. You don't have to put your glass panel in your straw-baled wall to go, hey, everyone, look at how straw-based this is. You can just say, oh, that's just one of the materials in the building. We don't need to make a big thing about that. We can have our super slick, modern, beautiful house that fits your personality or whatever it is, or your style, or whatever people want, without making a big deal about it being environmentally friendly. And I think that sort of fetishization of being environmentally friendly has seriously damaged the industry and you're sort of seeing it a bit. A lot of my clients want to do good, and they actually want to show off with being good, which is really nice. And it's part of like sort of, hey, there's a way of building which is good for the planet. But I don't know if that attitude is going to last for 100 years. And at the moment, they're too expensive, aren't they? Because I don't know what you think when you suddenly see that there's a hemp panel that going into your building or into a tender. It's terrifying to see. I mean, how do you cost that? You don't know, you've not worked with it. And this is that other thing. I remember you talking about panelized construction on one of your projects, and how that's given you a massive headache because all these big pre-cut insulated panels have come in and you've had to try and fit them into the site. Whereas actually what you guys want to do is stick build. I think in this particular project, wasn't it? With a stick build where your guys know what they're doing. They can take account for the unpredictabilities in the site, and and that's kind of where I'd want to err to, and I like it in a tender when you send these drawings out to contractors, for them to come back and go, I don't think we should build it like this. We've got a better idea. We're actually amazing at this building technique. I will do this for you cheaper because my guys prefer it. I don't know what this other one is. Like, why can't we do it like this? Well, look, and look, we've got our price down cheaper for it.
I mean, that's the ideal dovetailing of a perfect design and constructional design and build team, where you are getting that feedback, but often that feedback comes, as you say, at tender stage. It's too late. The barriers that you have to go through to get through planning, to then think and to then have that discussion with the client to go, actually, we've had a discussion now, and actually we might just tweak that because it's a bit easier for the build and it's going to save you a little bit. The pain of starting again is just ridiculous. And we should all be collaborating at a much earlier stage.
On smaller projects I do, goes to tender, if it's under sort of 40 square meters or 50 square meters, generally just stay out of it and let a good builder take over. But the bigger projects, it almost feels like every time you go to tender, you just start the project again. And it's really frustrating, isn't it? Because the cost comes in too high, you start redesigning it, you start talking to the builder, they've got all these other problems that you've set in place already, and you're just kind of snookered a little bit, and you're like, what was all of this work for that we did, drawing this building that wasn't going to be built?
Do you think it all comes back to just a mistrust, and typically around a financial mistrust? I mean, you wrote an article, it was called Build Together. I read it on LinkedIn. That was a RIBA article where effectively someone relatively senior is bashing contractors. And, it's just almost stems from the start that there's just this negativity towards contractors. And, where does that come from?
It's I don't know how you guys deal with it. It's classist. It's old-fashioned, and it really upsets me on quite a deep level how mistrustful and how much dislike and misunderstanding there is for people in the building trade, for the people thinking they're stupid and not very clever. I mean, it's this mistrust of capitalism. You get scared about, as a client, you're having to go into this space which the government quite often protects you from, because when you build a house, you are exposed to pure capitalism, aren't you? It's negotiations, it's the economy, everything matching up what you've got to do. And you're absolutely terrified because you never come in contact with that normally in your day-to-day life. And then suddenly you're here, and then suddenly there's a contractor who's like used to dealing with modern day polymaths. I don't think I've met many people as intelligent and as good and just such all-round people as people who run contracting companies. It's an absolute minefield. You guys are incredible. And I think lots of clients realize this by the time they finish their project. They just go, wow, how did they keep all of that in that head? How did they keep all these people coming to site? How are we only £2,000 over budget? And that ability to keep this 3D space in their head, to build it, to take on board all of the amazing idiosyncrasies of the clients and all the wonderful things they want. And then quite often a sort of a tantrum-led architect who also wants their building to be like this. And then you're balancing that with the council suddenly turning up, and then an irate neighbour, and then you've still got to build the building and go home and live your life. And almost like that's the space I feel like the architect's trying to make for somebody to come and build, is that you've tried to get rid of all of those unknowns, isn't it? So that they have space to actually do that monumental task.
It must make it a nightmare to build a business as an architect where that feedback cycle of positivity can take so long.
5 years,
you do that first project.
4 years.
And there's the bitterness, and then the elation, and then the discovery, and then the referral. It must, those who set out into architecture, kind of winding right back to where you started of, dreaming of design and trying to make a difference.
Yeah. And that's why we operate a sort of, we do free work for people, because who are we? We're a young practice of 4 years now. So now it's sort of ticking over into people referring us. Whereas we're still sort of operating, we do free work for people because, well, we charge more than most. And why would you pay somebody more if you get 3 quotes if you didn't think they were adding more value? So that's why it's our marketing, is we do free work for people before we start. You bring us the site, bring us your project, and you get a feasibility report and some drawings and sketches and scribbles for you to take to friends, to take to banks, to take to finances, to take to your development partners. And ultimately, how do you know if you want to work with somebody until you've worked with them?
Yeah. In your eyes, what are the best clients? What are the ones that you really enjoy the most working with?
The difficult clients.
The difficult ones. Okay, that's interesting.
I like a difficult client. Otherwise, what's the point in having an architect or someone to help you design stuff? No, I love those difficult clients who have high expectations and want something more than they're able to afford quite often. And you have to try and work out a way of doing that.
So winding back a little, 5 years now, Winter Architects, 6 years maybe, 2019.
Yeah.
So just in the mix of COVID or just in the aftermath, what was your drive to step in and do it yourself? Was it because you were disappointed elsewhere? Was it because you're at a stage in your life where you thought, I feel like I can do this now? What was the instigator?
I've never really liked architects, and I've spent my life trying to sort of step away from them, because I think when architects get together, they get a bit talky and complainy about the world. So suddenly when you work in an architect's office, you're surrounded by architects, which is tricky. Whereas suddenly when you run a practice, there aren't so many, and I don't actually employ any architects. I've just got a few draftspeople and people from different backgrounds. I've got an events builder, a few people who've worked in construction and who are drawing, and it's quite nice to have people who don't call themselves architects. I don't know why, but I think the public needs that term to refer to them. But yeah, I think a lot of the projects I worked on, I've always wanted to run a practice, and not a small practice, quite a big one. My dream sort of at university, that sounds epic. The idea at university was to take all this hippy-dippy eco stuff and just get rid of the stigma and try and embed it into the high and sort of fast world of architecture. One of my friends was like, what we need is a rammed earth building, a skyscraper in the centre of London. Then we know we've done it. In the business district, where everyone's going to work around this rammed earth structure, which is the best material to build from environmentally, because you just dig a hole and you pile it up on the spot. You don't have to transport anything, it's all just there. Obviously, there are so many constraints why that wouldn't necessarily happen, and I'm not necessarily advising that in this situation, because it's not feasible. But it's kind of that doing big things. In order to make a big change, you need to do a big thing. And I felt loads of the practices I went to wanted to stay quite small. They were really good practices, but they never really wanted to expand that far.
Do you find there's a misunderstanding from clients of how much work actually goes on behind the scenes to deliver?
Always, because they're not professionals. Clients are not professionals. They don't know how long things take. I think there's an inability for the entire construction industry to not explain it to clients. And I think this is something on everybody's head. I just don't think people are very good at telling people how long things take. Well, this is that thing as well, like, what sort of architect do you want? Some architects can spend 400 hours doing the concept design. And in the first 100 hours, you'll get 90% of it there, won't you? And then the next 300 hours, you're going to be refining and refining and refining and refining. And perhaps you want that level of refinement in that project so that it gets to a really incredible level, but maybe you don't. And I think a lot of the time, I can't speak for the other industries. I think the architects think they're being underpaid because they're delivering more than they need to deliver, because they want every project to be 99% perfect rather than just 90% perfect. And some do need to be that well done in bits, but others don't. And I think it's misunderstanding what that client wants.
I think that one of the big issues with construction in general is the not knowing, the mistrust. It comes back to that mistrust. It's, what am I getting here? What am I paying for? Whereas you look at any other profession, you're paying for time, and you're paying a lot for time, but you're paying for that experience.
I don't know if you found that there are some architects you work with where one company, say the same problem comes up in two different projects, one architect solves a problem in an hour, and maybe the other one, they solve the same problem in 5 hours, but make it easier. And you're like, which then means somebody's spending half a day, you've got 3 people on site for half a day less.
Yeah, I always like the architects you have built that actually really then think about it and take a step back and go, okay, how can we make this easier or quicker or better? And that takes a bit more time and a bit more wisdom, but the end outcome is potentially cheaper and better.
Yeah, more efficient is the word, isn't it? I've always found you have to avoid the word cheaper. How much of my time should I give you and charge you for, even though you adamantly don't think you need it? But you take that risk going, I think they really are, this is going to save them money. And that's when the conflict comes in, when you start doing different things, isn't it? Everyone has a different idea of what the end result should be, or a different idea of how to get to the same end result. That's what it is, isn't it? And then that's experience. It's like, how much does this contractor know what's going to happen here? with this client that I've been working with for 3 years, how much does this client know about how good this contractor is and doesn't need extra oversight or extra assistance, collaboration? And you're going to get those judgment calls wrong so many times, aren't you?
But so much of that comes from just life experience and doing it again.
Is it life experience? I mean, yeah, it is life experience, but is it also just being able to match character-wise with those people? But yeah, it's about meeting that person and seeing if you speak a language where you can have a good argument where you don't upset each other, or good discussion to get to a point.
Yeah. But that's why you do your first free session, so you can get through that first speed dating moment and really try and get to know them.
Yeah. No, it's the best thing we do. I've had so many people wax lyrical about how we should not give work away. It's another one of those things, I think, which is controversial and gets people straight on the keyboard, doesn't it? Like fighting. Like, you should not do any work for free. And you're like, but you're selling something unique, so people need to know what it is. And they won't know what it is until they've tried it.
What's keeping you going, Jay? What's the drive now to, is it the dawn of your 4-year-old company that you want to see that goal achieved, or is there a particular part of the current built environment that you want to affect for the future?
There's the sort of the long term and the short term. Day to day, I just love the clients. I think they're wacky and brilliant and odd and idiosyncratic, and they have so many quirks that I just love finding out about. Anyone who starts a project is mad. Anyone, because they have such a big long-term idea of wanting to do something, which is fairly rare and exceptional. The people who want to build are exceptional people, because no logic says you should do it. It's hard, it's risky, it's exhausting. The payoffs are great at the end, and they can see that, and it really attracts just phenomenally brilliant people. And what I find really incredible is that the developer who owns half of London, half of Hackney Wick, is very similar to the person having an extension done, and where they live is very similar, and you can't tell how different these people are just by sitting at their table, sort of financially or position-wise or ambition. And you just get this amazing journey of discovering who they are and trying to match up a thing to them. And then it gets out of your control, doesn't it? And you just see something appear. And you never quite expect it to look it never looks the way you expected it in the end. It always comes out kind of as an unpredictable thing. And that's the other thing as well. When a project finishes, it's sad. I don't know if you've ever had this with clients. You've spent every day for 3 years, 4 years thinking about this project and this person and these people, and whether they're a developer or a private client. And then suddenly there's this cut-off point, and you almost feel lost because you've had ups and downs, but you just don't talk to them anymore because the moment you've stopped, the project's finished and it's over. And sometimes like, oh, I'm glad this is over, that was exhausting, but we're there. But then you're like, no, we've been so far together, and I think you have this incredible journey with them. And that really keeps me in it day to day. You've made something emotionally from nothing, and you've also economically made something from nothing. Every time you finish a building, you've made a new thing. As a group, you've generated £700,000 of GDV for the UK. You've made a big product, and on top of that, all these jobs have appeared, including your own and everything. And quite often it's not off the client's finance because it's come from the bank. So it's this whole sort of creation of something that benefits everybody from a little thought, and it's all sort of knitted together, isn't it, and becomes a solid object, which will be dismantled in 100 years, 200 years' time.
So the next client knocks on the door. What's a perfect project for you? What would get you inevitably so excited that you couldn't turn off and would be that perfect project?
I think it would be probably trying to find those 5 people who didn't think they could get along, who all wanted to build a series of 5 houses on a plot of land together, and negotiating your way through that size of that level of complexity. So yeah, no, I don't want one client. I want 3 or 4 stakeholders, all with their overlapping contradictions of how they want to live or what they want to do with this land. And that's where it gets really, really interesting. So if you did 5 houses, you'd be doing 5 houses to 3.5%. But if we did 5 houses together, we'd probably only charge them 4 or 5% to get them all together. So they'd all be making a real-time money saving by spreading your cost between them all. Actually, there was one project, my favourite ever project to practice was in Totnes, and it was for a group who called themselves the Elders. And there were 8 people actually, between the age of 65 and 89. And they wanted to build some houses to die in. That was their brief. And what they wanted to do was build 9 houses on this bit of land. And they were going to be able to then pay for somebody to look after them all as they got old and senile. That was their plan. And then after they died, they wanted the land fixed, the properties fixed at a affordable buying rent that will always track with inflation. So nobody could ever make money from those properties, and they'd always just stay at the same value, increasing with inflation. They didn't want their houses to be an investment for anybody. They wanted them to be a place to live, which is kind of where we should be.
It's because that's what a lot of architecture is, right? It's trying to work out how does it all interact with the environment around? Is it what is that community feel? And I could see that being incredibly interesting.
Like, who are you or me or anyone else to just guess how they want to live? You don't know. Everyone's so wildly different, and then you end up forcing them into this way of living. Like do you know about the Frankfurt kitchen? The sort of the history behind that, and you might have seen it in all the sort of the terraces in London and Oxford, where you have the extension on the back of the house, which has a kitchen which is really narrow with counters down either side. And it was designed by a chemist in the 1930s as the most efficient way to cook. But what it does is completely separate, up until now, what has predominantly been a female role of cooking into one side of the house. So you're segregated from what's happening. And that just doesn't fit with modern life. You don't have one person hidden away in the corner cooking with everything set out like a laboratory. You now want to be in the main space where you're chatting to everybody. You've got the kids on the floor, so you're looking at them as you're cooking, and you're also sort of thinking about doing this. And it just forgot all these other things about how you run a family. You
mean not everyone's a chef?
Yeah, not everyone's a chef. Now we're all stuck in these old houses which have this way of living which is not how we live anymore.
I guess that's part of your, that client knocks on the door, it's trying to extract that information and look at what they've already got. And sometimes it's not build more, it's build differently and use the existing space.
Yeah.
Doesn't really fall into your negative way of building, where the more you build, the better. But we're also confined by space.
We're confined by space, or not sometimes. I had one client who came to me and said, my house is too big, can you help us? They knew something was wrong, and this was the only way they had of saying, the house feels too big. And it's like, what do we actually mean by the house is too big? Because when you start saying, okay, let's rearrange the house, should we develop this? Should we turn it into 3 apartments and sell off half of it? But no, they really loved the house. It was really beautiful proportions. They loved the rooms. They just weren't using them because it was an old building. It was quite a big house. It was a really lovely, it was such a beautiful house. But they just couldn't quite work out how to use it, and they were in love with their house. To touch that house or change anything inside was just, if you suggested it, they had an emotional connection, and they loved all those spaces, they loved all those rooms, but they were just really, really hard to live in because they were designed for somebody to be keeping roaring fires going all the time. And in the end, it was a really nice little sort of new living space on the side, which they decided on. So yeah, there's that difficulty in trying to interpret what people say.
So thinking far ahead, tail end of your career, what do you want winter architecture to have meant? What would you like to look back and go, that's what people are going to remember me for?
I don't think I want to be remembered.
Oh, come on, Jake, that's depressing.
Just an ordinary person, just going to put these buildings together. I don't think I necessarily want to be remembered. I would just like people to realise that they can build more than they think they can have, and that people can have more than they let themselves think they can have. If sustainability could be a normal, boring thing by the time I'm 90, that's just accepted, like, you just use screws to put a building together, no one would question that. If it had got to that level, in the projects that we'd managed to do, I'd be really happy. If everything I build could one day be dismantled and turned into another building somewhere else, I think that would be an achievement. Yeah, which you wouldn't be known for, so that would be all right.